So my name is Kelsey Higginson, and I'm going to talk with you today about adventure-based learning, which is a great way to build community. Dr. Ruth Chen and Taylor Benjamin have also helped with this presentation. To get started, what is adventure-based learning? So adventure education can actually be used in any subject. It's more common in physical education to call it adventure-based learning, or ABL. ABL is a curriculum model that can be used in physical education. It's based in the ideas of John Dewey, who we see here on the right. And John Dewey believed that there wasn't any true learning if you didn't stop to reflect on what happened, to stop and think about what just occurred. And that reflection was where the learning actually occurred. So this quote here in green is from him: "We do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience." So just doing something doesn't necessarily teach us anything, but thinking about what happened, that's where we get the learning from. And then it's also taken a little from David Kolb, who formalized this process, and he called it the experiential learning cycle. And with this, he has formalized steps of how to go through experience and reflection to help people learn about what happened during that experience. So in other words, adventure-based learning is doing with reflection. And we have to have that reflection piece, otherwise we're not doing adventure education or adventure-based learning. So this is Kolb's experiential learning cycle. We're going to talk about each of the steps. It starts here at the top with experience. As you're going through the experience, this can be anything. This can be a typical physical education class. This can be going on a hike. This could be having to do a project with geography. Experience is just anything that happens. After the experience is over, we go to the second step, which is observations and reflections. This is where we're trying to get students to think what happened. We're just trying to get them to describe the events that just happened. And we want to get beyond, we won a basketball game. We want to get a little bit deeper into more of, well, we won because we talked really, really well, and I always was able to get the pass when I needed the pass. So we want a little bit more details. Then we get into the third step, which is generalizing. This is where we kind of start to think, so what? Why does it matter that those things happened? So we're thinking about what happened, why we succeeded or why we didn't succeed. The generalizing step is taking some of those principles or skills that helped us succeed or did not succeed, and starting to generalize, does that happen in other situations? So it could be that we're playing Foursquare and it worked really well because everyone was playing fairly and following the rules, and people weren't targeting one person in our Foursquare game. And then we could generalize that to talking about being with our friends in math class, and we have to solve a puzzle. And it worked really well because all the different groups in class were all playing fairly, and inside our own group, we weren't targeting the one person who was confused. So we're starting to get at the principles and the skills that helped us succeed here can maybe help us succeed in other situations. That's why it maybe matters. That's our so what. Then we can move on to the fourth step, which is transfer. And transfer is our now what. And this is where, now that we've seen those skills or those principles could maybe happen in other situations, now we're trying to transfer the good things, the things that we learned through this experience and reflection, into other situations. So maybe our cooperation broke down because only one person was giving ideas and everyone else was ignored. So we're going to transfer that to tomorrow when we're playing soccer and we're trying to figure out the best strategy to beat this other team. We're going to give everyone an opportunity to share their opinion and their idea and not just base it on who's ever the loudest. So we're trying to transfer this, the skills that we learned, into other things. And then now that we've transferred it, we go back to new experiences. This could be the same experience but with greater knowledge, or it can be a new experience where we've transferred skills from one setting to another. So then this cycle repeats. We go around and around, there's another experience, we stop and reflect, we generalize, and then we transfer new skills to new situations and repeat. Some other features of using adventure-based learning in physical education are the experiential learning cycle, so what we just talked about, and some ways to facilitate that in physical education are to follow these 3 basic steps. We have a brief, so this is kind of like a thought question at the beginning of class, or a short video clip, or a short story that starts to introduce the skills that you're trying to introduce for the day. So it's just to get students thinking along the line that you're trying to get them to go down. Then we have the activity, and when we're doing the activity for adventure-based learning, the teacher gets to manipulate or change the rules of the game to try and get certain things to happen. So you may specifically be vague about the rules as you introduce a game so that miscommunication or frustration happens and students have to face that frustration and start to understand, we need to have clear expectations so that everybody's on the same page and I don't get frustrated. So the teacher gets to set up the rules or the game to try and ensure that certain things are going to occur during that game. And then the last part is our debrief. The debrief is our reflection. So the debrief, we've had our activity, certain things happened. Now our debrief, we sit down as a class and we talk through what happened, what made it good, what made it not good, and how could we learn from that experience to make it better next time. So we always have those 3 steps if we're doing ABL in physical education. We have a brief thinking question, we have an activity designed to put students in specific situations, and then we have a debrief to reflect on what happened. Other features of ABL are adventure. So it's adventure-based learning. We want an adventure component. And part of this is to do activities that are not always typical. So by doing an activity that's kind of a novel activity, it's a little more engaging, it's a little more exciting. It's something students haven't done a million times, so they don't know if they're going to be good at it or bad at it. And it's a new challenge to kind of face. And these novel activities could be different team building activities. It could be outdoor adventure activities that you don't normally do. It could be a new game you've never tried in your class. But we're trying to break out of the norm of what we always do in most of our classes. And then the third feature for ABL is that we can use adventure-based learning to establish classroom norms. This is how we start to build that community in our classroom. We take the time to sit down and talk with the class and the students. This is how we want our class to function. This is how we want our group to interact with one another, to respect each other. This is the normal behavior that we want to see every day. So you might kind of be thinking, well, that's great, I know what the features are, but why do I care? Why do I want adventure-based learning? So just thinking through North Dakota, I have the results here from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey which is a national survey sent out. It's typically done in later middle school and high school students throughout the country. I have some results from 2019, and this is just North Dakota. So they pulled out North Dakota data, it's not the nation. In North Dakota in 2019, 14.7% of youth were electronically bullied online. Just under 20% of youth were bullied at school. Another 30% felt sad or hopeless. And they felt sad or hopeless for at least 2 weeks and hopeless enough to stop doing what they typically do. And so this is a strong enough feeling of being sad and hopeless that they could start to be classified as having depression. 30% of youth. And then our last one is 18.8% of youth in North Dakota seriously considered committing suicide in 2019. So our youth and our students are facing many issues that are making them feel excluded, feel alone, feel sad and hopeless about life. And adventure-based learning is not a magic bullet. It's not going to magically cure everything. But by using adventure-based learning to create a community in our classroom where everyone is valued, everyone can contribute, everyone is safe and accepted, we can start to hopefully decrease some of those symptoms of students feeling hopeless or excluded or not wanting to continue on. Another thing to think about is the use of sports to model the good things that we want in life. And just kind of think about what are we showing and modeling to the kids and the youth. Are we more like this picture here on the left where we're teammates even though we're on different teams, where we can be friendly, we can be buddies, or are we more like these parents here on the right where we argue every call and we yell at the ref and we get upset when our kid doesn't get the exact amount of playing time or doesn't get the shot? Just kind of think about what are we modeling to the next generation. And once again, adventure-based learning is a way to help us model the right skills and to help our kids and youth to pick up more of those positive skills so that we can interact with each other in productive and healthy ways. Third kind of consideration is just thinking of society in general. If you look over the past few years, we've had economic collapse, we've had peaceful protests, we've had non-peaceful protests, we've had comments on Facebook or YouTube where people watch a video and then the comments below it are just rude and nasty and things that people probably wouldn't say if they were face-to-face with someone. But because there's anonymity online, they say things that are rude. And so these are kind of the interactions that we're modeling, and that's not really what we would hope for our children and our youth to pick up on. So I would promote adventure-based learning and other ways of teaching positive skills, positive ways of thinking about yourself, positive ways of interacting with others as a way to help children and youth pick up some better skills that can help society become more of a positive community in general. So some of the benefits of adventure-based learning, if you see here at the bottom, Lee and Zhang in 2019 did a review. They looked up all of the research studies that had been done where people used adventure-based learning in physical education. And they found several different benefits through these research studies throughout the years. And one was that students who experienced ABL had higher self-concept. So they had a stronger knowledge and confidence in who they were. So they had better confidence in themselves. Second benefit was increased group trust. They trusted their classmates more. They felt more comfortable around their classmates and willing to take risks and to make mistakes. The third benefit is increased belief in maintaining social relationships. So these students believed that they could create and maintain positive relationships with other people. They had those skills. They knew how to keep good relationships going. A fourth benefit was students had an increased feeling of well-being. So they looked specifically at anxiety and depression and self-esteem. And anxiety and depression levels decreased for those who experienced ABL. And then self-esteem, so belief in your own worth, increased. And then a fifth benefit that they found through all of these research studies was an increased feeling of autonomy. So students who had been through adventure-based learning were more confident in their ability to make their own decisions, to find solutions to problems, to create opportunities and choices for themselves. So they weren't as dependent on teacher instruction, do this, do this, do this. The students were a little more autonomous and able to be productive and make choices themselves. So there are a lot of benefits that can come by doing an adventure-based learning unit in our class. Now we get to the question of how do I do it? All of these benefits sound nice, but I don't know anything about adventure-based learning. So we're going to spend the next part going through how you can implement adventure-based learning in your gymnasium. How does this translate to your setting? There are three things we want to think about. The first is to be intentional. Gould and Volker here did a review, and there's other studies as well, that the positive skills that we think youth learn from sports, so teamwork, dedication, cooperation, all of those things that we promote as the value of sports, being on youth sports, those skills are actually only learned if they're specifically taught. So if we just throw kids on a youth sports team, they're not necessarily going to learn what teamwork is unless the coach and the parents sit down and say, this is what teamwork means, and it looks like this. And the teachers and the coaches and the parents actually sit down and explain it and point it out and model it. Then the positive skills are learned. But if we don't actually intentionally explain it and point it out, our kids and youth don't necessarily learn those skills. It's not automatic. We have to be intentional about teaching those skills. A second point to remember is to follow the sequence. So if we're really trying to build community, adventure-based learning has a specific order of games and skills to work on. It starts with Deinhibitors. So these are icebreakers, get to know you things. Then the second step is working on communication. Communication is foundational. If we can't talk to each other, we can't do much of anything else. Then we move on to cooperation. After cooperation, we can move into trust, then problem solving, then challenge. And if you skip out of order, the group won't necessarily have the group social skills to adequately solve those problems well. So going in the right order helps them build up the skills in the right order so that they do form that community bond, they do act as a group, and they are able to work together for a common goal. And then third point, kind of repeating from earlier, don't skip the reflection. Thinking back to Kolb's experiential learning cycle, 3 of those 4 steps happen in the reflection. Yes, the experience is important, but if we don't have the reflection, we're not necessarily going to learn what we hoped students would learn. So don't skip that reflection piece. So what are some examples of doing Deinhibitors? So Deinhibitors, once again, we're trying to break the ice. We're trying to help students get to know each other And then some of the purpose of these different games are to have the whole class look silly and act silly together so that people learn it's okay to make mistakes and to maybe look silly. Other people have done it as well, and people aren't going to laugh at me if I make a mistake. So we're trying to get people to let their guard down and to realize that it can be okay, it can be safe in this group to just be themselves, and you don't have to be on guard the whole time. So here on the right, we have several examples of games that can be kind of Deinhibitors to help us break the ice and get ready to interact the way that we want to interact with each other. So we have gotcha, we have high five, we have egg, chicken, dinosaur, superhero, show off. This is sometimes called morphing. Then we have screaming toes, chicken baseball, pairs tag, have you ever, and blob tag. And I'm going to send out a handout that explains how to play all of these activities. So I'll give you kind of bullet points to follow that explain how to set up and do each of these activities in your class. We also have a short video to watch that gives an example of how a few of these games work. All right, after watching that example video for Deinhibitors, once your class is willing and able to interact with each other so they can mix and be with different groups, they can know it's okay to act silly, now we work on communication. So communication is important. Students need to be able to share their thoughts. They need to be able to give their ideas and their opinions in a group, and for the others in the group to receive that. So we have 5 different example games and activities here: Giants, Wizards, and Elves, Charades or a Marketplace Relay, 4 at a Time, Birthday Rope, and Help Me Tag. And each of these games is set up to force students to have to communicate with one another in different ways. And often they are kind of set up so that miscommunication will happen at some point. And that gives you a good chance to debrief and to talk about where did the miscommunication happen, how could we do better next time, and to really pull that out in your reflection. Once again, we have a short video, so I will switch and show that short video of a couple of these activities here. All right. As you're working through communication, this is a good time to start to establish classroom norms. How do we want people to interact with each other and behave in our class? And one way to do it is our 5-finger contract. And I'll move my picture so you can read all of the words. So we have our 5-finger contract. And with this, each of the fingers on our hand stands for a different idea or a different principle. Our thumb is to celebrate the efforts of ourselves and others. So celebrate everyone's contribution to the group. Good job, encouragement, we like it. Our pointer finger is to look out for number 1. And this might sound counterintuitive in a group, but this means that you're responsible for yourself first. Are you doing what you need to do? Are you contributing and paying attention? Are you trying to sabotage the group? Don't point the finger at other people. Make sure you're doing what you're doing first. Then we have our middle finger, and this one is kind of reminiscent of don't put down other people. So don't make fun of other people, no rude comments. We only want put-ups. We only want encouragement and positive comments. Don't put down others in the group. Then we have our ring finger or our 4th finger, and this one is about commitment. So being committed to yourself and to the group, trying to help the group reach the group's goals. Are you committed to helping everyone get to the end? And then our 5th finger, our pinky finger here, is often the most easily injured. It's small, it's out on the edge. So this one reminds us of safety. Being able to look out for the safety of everyone in the group. So look out for the little guy, making sure that those who are sometimes pushed aside or thought ill of or belittled, making sure that doesn't happen. Everyone is included and valued, and we're looking out for emotional and physical safety of everyone in our group. So this is one way that I kind of like to think through norms in how we want our classroom to function. Is this 5-finger contract? And when you introduce something like this, sit down and talk about it with your students. Talk about what each principle means. Have students come up with what does being responsible for yourself look like and sound like and feel like in our physical education class. You could even give everybody an outline of a handprint, and they have to write out their own ideas. To me, this means I'm going to give lots of high fives and smiles to my teammates. To me, this means we're going to give everybody a chance to share their idea before we pick which one to follow. And you can kind of brainstorm. And then throughout the school year, come back to this. Keep reminding people, we have our 5-finger contract. We're going to abide by this and follow these rules in class today. There are other ways to establish norms. This is just an example of a method that I've enjoyed and works well with adventure-based learning. So I'll come back to the corner. All right, our third step after we've broken the ice and helped people get to know each other, after we've gotten some communication skills, now we can start to work on cooperation. So we're using that communication to work together to accomplish group tasks. So some example games for this one are Moonball, Island Volleyball, Fill the Bucket, a Star Wars game, and Frenzy. And once again, we have some video examples of what some of these look like. And on the handout, it kind of goes through and explains how to do each of these activities. So after we have cooperation, we're able to work together. Now we can start to build up some trust. And there's both emotional trust and physical trust. We have to trust that everyone else in our group isn't going to make fun of us or belittle us or put us down. And then we can also trust that they're going to keep me physically safe as we go through these challenges. No one's going to try and hurt me, and everyone's going to make sure that everyone in the group is okay. And a few activities that can help us work on trust are turnstile, triangle tag, yurt circle, and a trust walk. And once again, we have a video showing you a couple of these activities. So we'll pause and switch to that video. So some things to think out with those activities. All of the activities that we shared in this presentation are great activities. They can help pull out specific things. They're often activities that are more like an adventure. They're not typically done in your many classes, and so they can be great ideas. But you also might be thinking, that's wonderful, that's great, but I have so many other things in my curriculum. I don't have place for something different that doesn't help me meet the jumping standards or throwing and catching and all those other things that my students need to learn. So another idea that I want to put out there as we're starting to wrap up this presentation is being able to adapt activities that you're already doing. And maybe you just need a different frame for those activities, a different way of looking at those activities. So one thing that you can think about is we still need to be able to make mistakes and accept each other. We still need to communicate. We still need to trust each other if we're playing soccer or volleyball or jump rope or any of the other activities that we often do in physical education. And so we can take those typical lessons and maybe just frame them a little bit differently so that we are deliberately, intentionally pointing out those communication skills, interpersonal skills, and helping those come out in the forefront. So maybe you're working on communication, and you're playing basketball. So you do a brief at the beginning. What is communication? How does communication help us or hurt us? And then you introduce a skill. All right, in basketball, in order to have a successful offense, we need to be able to communicate about who's available for a pass, who's not open, and where the pass should go. So we can practice that in these ways, and then you send students out to practice playing basketball. They're working on their passing skills, they're working on their communication skills, and then after that activity, you can sit down and debrief, talk about the physical skills, the passing, and then also talk about our interpersonal skills. How was our communication? What worked? What didn't work? So we can take some of the same activities that you might already be doing in class, but if you present them with a different frame, a different way of looking at it, you can still work on these community building skills at the same time. So we're working on our physical skills and our interpersonal skills, our social emotional skills, all together, all at once. So while there are wonderful ABL games, and I have a whole handout and we showed several videos, I love all those games. I think they're a great way, especially to start the beginning of a school year or a semester, to build community in your class right at the beginning. That doesn't always work for everyone. So maybe think about taking the units that you already do and presenting them in a new framework with that brief and activity designed to pull out certain skills and our debrief so that students reflect on what was happening. So I want you to kind of think about what could you do in your situation to use adventure-based learning. So just take a couple minutes and think about what skills do you want your students to have as far as building community. Are they comfortable with one another? Can they communicate? Do they cooperate well? Do they trust each other in your class? And then think about what activities you already do or new ones that you want to try maybe that can help students work on those skills, work on communication, work on trust, work on knowing it's okay to make a mistake. And then maybe share in the chat or share in the comments what you came up with so we can share with our colleagues and learn from each other. So once you've gone through those 2 minutes, hopefully we all have some new ideas, different ways of thinking about adventure-based learning in our class. And this is a wrap-up. We can use adventure-based learning to build community in our classrooms. It helps us to establish classroom norms that include all students in our class. Adventure-based learning, if we go through it, can help support a positive and a safe classroom for all students in the gymnasium. It also enables a diverse group of students to work together. So oftentimes in these alternative activities or these adventure activities, it's not always the most high-skilled physically that we listen to. It can bring out other strengths of organization or communication. And so different strengths and different students are brought out as leaders in different situations. So it really enables people of all abilities and skills to work together to reach a common goal. And then adventure-based learning also allows teachers and students to connect with each other better. You're reflecting and sharing those thoughts and ideas with each other. So you get to know each other a little differently than maybe you would in a typical physical education setting. Last thing we're going to do is just leave it open for questions. Questions that you have about adventure-based learning, where it came from, how to do it. So we'll leave some time for questions here. I'll be around to answer them. And then when we're done, I do have a few references on our last slide of where I got some of the information that I referenced here. So we'll come back for questions and then go forward to the references again. All right, So hopefully we've all asked our questions and we paused that video. Here's the references. As always, if you have other questions, feel free to contact myself or Ruth Chen at Minot State University. We'll put our contact information in the bio that goes with this presentation, and contact us with any questions or concerns, and hopefully you have a great time trying out adventure-based learning and using that to build a community inside your gymnasium. Thank you very much for coming to this presentation.